Because this is Lancaster area Woodturners' first ever evening cocktail hour at 6 o'clock on March the 16th. And it's cocktail hour in the evening because our special guest today is Richard Raffan. And I'm going to introduce Richard in a second, but before I do, the only housekeeping thing I want to say is I have muted everybody. You can unmute yourselves when you want to talk. If you want to get attention and ask a question or make a point, the best way to do it is use the reactions tab. Down on the bottom of your screen, you can see all the Zoom things down there, and the third one from the right says reactions. And when you click on that, the first big button that comes up is raise hand. And when you click raise hand, your box on the Zoom screen pops to the top of my Zoom screen, so I know you've raised hand. So I can call on you when there's a break in the discussion, and you can make your point or ask your question. That'll work better than just jumping in. But a lot of us are wired to just jump in, so that is okay too. But if it turns into crosstalk, we'll mute you and sort it out afterward. And with that, I'm going to, in a second here, spotlight Richard Raffan, an old friend of mine. And we'll start by asking Richard a few questions and getting some background, and then we'll show a few slides, and then we'll take some more conversation and a few more slides. So you can jump in or come on board with questions and queries pretty much any time in this. Richard, I wonder if you'd start out by telling us how you got into all this and how you got into writing books and all like that.
Oh, yes, just a brief history.
Yeah.
I got into it looking for something else to do. So it really was a kind of tree change, and I was looking at all kinds of things, from plumbing to picture framing and odd stuff like that. And the only cabinet maker I knew was John Makepeace, which was, or knew of, who was at kind of top of the field in Britain. I was in England at that time. And I thought that would take too long to learn. Then my sister, who's a potter, said, how about wood turning? You could go and learn from Douglas Hart just down the road from where she had done her training. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And then I went off and approached Douglas, who wasn't interested at first. And then I went back. I couldn't find anyone else, yes, I didn't know anything about turning really at all.
Well, wait a minute. When is this, and how old are you at the time?
I was 26, and I was working in London. I had a very good job there, and I just got a bit fed up with middle management, really. I didn't see much future in it.
What were you doing? What was your work before you took up turning?
I was managing, well, I worked for a wine company, wine shipper, and they'd taken over some wine retail stores, which sold only wines and spirits, no beers or anything. And I was managing 12 or 13 of their outlets at the time when I left, and I was on top of the job. I hadn't really got anything to do. Everything was kind of running nicely, and that was it. So I'd solved the problems before they occurred, generally. So that was it. I'd never done turning as a hobby. I just decided to go and do it anyway. I persuaded Douglas to take me on as a fee-paying student. It was my suggestion that I pay him, and we agreed on what had been about a month's salary for me, or what I saw, and which was £365 in 1970. And he would keep everything I made, and I'd be there for a year. Well, after about 4 months, he no longer wanted, he could see that he would have to find somebody else to produce the stuff I was making and he was selling, and he didn't really want to do that, didn't want to expand. I was beginning to run out of cash. I had money in the bank for a house, but that was about it. I was fully cashed up, which made a lot of difference. And I was single, which probably also helped. So I didn't have anybody else to worry about.
So how long were you learning from this guy, and then what did you do next?
Well, I didn't learn a thing from him. I saw him turn once for about 10 minutes, and I learned basically by watching the guy across the workshop who did all the productions, a fellow called Rendell Crang, who we called Bill. And I basically learned from him, and when if I had a catch or two and he couldn't stand it any longer, he'd rush over across the workshop and say, "What are you doing, lad?" not like that, like this, and then he'd hurry back to his lathe. And I cleared up all the shavings at the end of the evening and end of the day. And that was it. We worked 8 until 5 with half an hour for lunch and a kind of 10-minute coffee break morning and afternoon. And I don't know, I picked up the tools and I just enjoyed it from the beginning. So I learned how to use the gouges and scrapers from him. The skew chisel, I was taken around to see the guy who did their skew work, all their spindle turning, and he wasn't interested in teaching me. He took one look at me and said, that bugger can teach himself. And so I did. And I got a skew chisel and spent 2 weeks just turning spindles and getting them until I could get them down to about 1/8 of an inch and they didn't break. And then after about 4 months, I went off on my own. But I've been acquiring tools and stuff like that.
Well, what do you mean off on your own? Did you start a business right away?
Yep. I started in June. And so I had to make, I could make bowl. I was making stuff which you could sell within a couple of weeks. It was taking a long time to make a small bowl, but I could produce the stuff that is standard anyway. And then I bought the wrong lathe. I bought a Coronet Major, which was a piece of junk when it came to it, but I was seduced by the advertising. And after about 3 weeks, I ordered a Harrison Graduate, which is a much better lathe, and that took 3 months to arrive. And that was about the only decent lathe available in those days. There were no other turners around, really. It was very difficult to get tools.
What sorts of
really
things did you make?
On my own.
What sorts of things did you make, and how did you sell them?
Well, I was making bowls, and I made my scoops, and I had some very early ones here somewhere. So I made a lot of, where are we? A lot of these little things, and there's in the videos I'm doing online now.
Hold them still. Get them to a nice angle and hold them still. When you wave them around, we can't see them.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
So this is early design. They soon lost the knob on the end of the handle and became a bit slicker. But these are still made in around 1971 or 2. This would be 71. And one of my sister's customers, a ceramic shop in Hampstead in London, saw one in her kitchen and ordered 4 dozen. And so I made those. And then 6 weeks later, they ordered another 4 dozen. And so that was my basic cash flow there beginning. They were often sold elsewhere with a little sugar bowl. And basically I set out making, I actually had a catalog and with set sizes and a range of woods on offer, and people never ordered. When it came down to it, what I had available, if they might want large bowls in cherry or whatever else it was working, and I often didn't have the timber. And the other problem was that I couldn't make anything accurately enough and repeat it. So I ended up with a number of one-off bowls, probably about 150 one-off bowls in my efforts to try and make salad sets, which at the time seemed like a good idea. So I'd have one big bowl with 6 or 8 little ones around it, supposedly matching. And ideally they were taken out of one board, so you could line them all up and see the grain running through the lot. But I had catches, as what you do when you're beginning, especially with no instruction. So I had all these one-off bowls to get rid of. And I basically put them in the back of the car and went around little gift shops, which there were in almost every little town in England. And I'd walk in to the shop with a box load of stuff and getting it out. So I said, I wonder if you're interested in this. And as they were saying, no, we're not. Oh, maybe we'll look at that. And we'd have them all out on the floor. And the people would say, well, I have that, and that. And how much do I owe you? And write me a check. And that broadly is how I've worked ever since.
Now, how soon was it before you were actually making a living?
Probably 18 months was enough to. I was actually, yes, yes, I had money in the bank, but I was paying the bills almost instantly, but living on very little indeed, because my income dropped 90% for the first couple of years. So, but I was earning an awful lot of money in England, in London, in the late 60s.
And what was your workshop like, and how did it evolve?
My workshop was, well, I started off in a garden shed in my mother's house when I was brought up. And then she had moved, just as I was starting, to a rural property where there was a big barn. In fact, there were several sheds. My sister was running a pottery in one, and I was in a big barn in the other. So that was good for the moment I was there, probably for 18 months. And then I bought, and I had a house then, and I was commuting about 15 miles, which wasn't very convenient. And then I bought a huge building which had a shop in it, and there were some ramshackle units, flats up above, and a huge space underneath. And I moved into that. And I remember that cost £8,000 at the time. I had an income of probably a turnover of 400 a year. And I was able to put half, or I was able to come up with £4,000. So I owned half the building. I let every room in the place and shared the workshop with a boat building friend. So I was there for maybe another 18 months. And then with the way the property was in England at the time, I sold 3/4 of the building, which you can do in Britain, subdivide it, and kept the workshop at the bottom, and the rest was converted into flats, and the retail bit is still there.
Huh. And so how long were you in that reconfigured space?
I was in there for about 18 months, and then then I had the workshop, and I bought a house elsewhere in town, and that worked very well. And I was there probably for 3 years or so. And then the business was going well enough, I really needed bigger store space. And so I started looking out in the country a bit, and I bought an old farm without the land, just the buildings.
And did you turn everything yourself in those years, or did you have employees?
Well, almost everything I did. I did once. I'm just writing this up at the moment, and I'm amazed that after about it was in September that year, I approached David Miller Kitchen Shops in London, who a very well-known kitchen shop full of handmade, probably the biggest retailers of handmade craftware in the country at that time, and they sold a lot of handmade pottery and that kind of thing. And I got an order from them, so I was selling through them, and also through other little galleries, and mostly little kind of what you'd now call gift shops. It was pre-gallery time, and there was no competition for wood turning, which was the best thing of all. So I was selling to them. So
somewhere in there, you decided to start to write books. When did that happen, and how did that happen?
I was approached by Batsford in about 1978 to write, and I had I got a manuscript together. Might even have been a bit later, and then there was Albert Lecoff's symposium in Philadelphia, where I met you first,
Yeah.
And I
That
had
must have
the
been 79, I think.
was it 79. I think it was 1980. But
Maybe, yeah.
anyway, I had this
81.
manuscript and an offer from Batsford and pressure to sign on the dotted line. Then I heard that the mighty John Kelsey was likely to be at this symposium from Fine Woodworking, and so it seemed a sensible thing to kind of wave a manuscript under your nose. And I can't remember exactly what happened now, but and I also knew Roger Holmes, who was your editor in Britain at the time, who was working for Alan Peters. So that was a contact through the Devon Guild Craftsman I had.
Yeah, and as I
Anyway, so I
recollect,
went over there, and you quite liked the look of the manuscript, or Roger did, and Taunton then made a much better offer than I would ever have got out of anyone in Britain, or in fact, probably anyone anywhere.
probably sold a lot more books too than anyone in Britain ever would have.
Yes, I would say so. And Ray Key eventually picked up the contract I had.
And
so,
well, your book was
yeah,
also.
so any fame I've got is down to Taunton Press, or in the turning world anyway. I was well established in Britain elsewhere, though.
As I can recollect, we sold German language, Russian, I think. I'm not sure.
No, we've got one in German, French, and Chinese. I have the Chinese one here. Just been lent it.
Well, I see a couple of questions up there, and I'm going to go to them, and then we'll show a few slides. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Ron Sheehan got his hand up first. Ron, what do you want? What do you say?
Yeah. Richard, you're talking about selling in England. I remember reading something that you could not sell product unless you belonged to a guild or a association or something. Is that true?
No. It's no. Some of the there were one or two guilds there. There was they helped you sell, but I belonged to the Devon Guild of Craftsmen. But I think it sounded good on paper that I didn't actually put it on a letterhead or anything. Mm-hmm. No, generally, as I said before, I actually only went out selling twice, and then after that, people came to me because I think retailers, small retailers especially, are constantly looking at their competition or other people selling similar kind of stuff, and they'll go looking for product. Because the most difficult thing is if you're a small retailer is getting regular supply. So if you can come up with the goods regularly, as on demand, then or when required, then people are going to beat a pathway to your door, and that's still the case, I think.
Well, yeah, it sounded like you say you got started there when there wasn't much competition. People see the kind of stuff you do and get interested in. You have a good market.
Well, there was no competition from woodturners. The competition was potters, mostly ceramics. But I've always made domestic stuff. You're a potter, are you? I think we tend to think in terms of wood turning being the competition, but it's the potters and the metal workers and good quality plastic.
Other people making other tableware. Most of what you've made is useful things, not art things.
Yes. Even the kind of thin bowls I still regard as useful. I mean, I've got this one here, this was made in about 79, and it's apple, so it's quite large. As you can see, I cut the rim. I was shaping it at the time. Like that, and it's round bottomed, so I quite like pieces just to kind of gently wobble. That's been used as a salad bowl. My wife used it for wool for a few years, and more recently it's just been sitting around because it's too large for a domestic salad bowl for us anyway.
Mike Peace.
Yeah, Richard, your pictures and all your books are always so well done. I just wondered, did you make your own process pictures, or did you hire a photographer?
No, it's too expensive to hire a photographer. I've learned to do it myself. So Yes, one of the things I think you have to learn. Well, I'm about to have to learn how to do my own videos, which is something you probably know all about. So I might even be on you for that. So,
Well, Mike's one of the best at that.
he is. Now I enjoy always recommending his videos. So.
Matt Kilareski has his hand up. Matt's our club president. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Richard.
I never know where I'm looking.
Well, let's see. I can do something about.
No, I've got it.
Actually, wait. Watch this.
There we go. With a sister who's a potter, did you ever do work with her, or influenced by her work, or her work influenced by your work, or did you ever team up?
Not so much her. She hung up. She trained with two members, or with David Leach, who's a very well-known ceramicist in Britain, and we knew his son John, who had a thriving pottery, and his buddies. So I was lucky enough to hang around with really well-known stoneware potters. Richard Raffan gave me quite a bit of advice, and John Maltby was another one. And I think they were all members of the Devon Guild of Craftsmen at the time, and if you hang around with those people, some of it's bound to rub off, I think. So and they made. I can remember Richard Battram looking at a bowl which I felt at the time was a bit too heavy, a bit too thick, and he said, "No, that's really nice kind of weight to that." I think, well, if one of the gods of stoneware says something positive like that, you've got to take it on board. And so that's when I really started thinking about rims and that kind of thing with bowls. And that led me to what was my kind of standard salad bowl. I've got one of those here somewhere too. So this is a standard salad bowl from made in 1977. And
wow,
I did these went through David Mellor's kitchen shops. They're all in claret ash.
So at that time, how long did it take you to make that at that time? And did you have what we think of as a bowl gouge?
I was using the old Sorby flared gouges, the carbon ones, which I think were I think they were sold as 3/4 inch. They were quite wide and flared. Is that right, Annie? Is it? I see you nodding. They were. That was what I used. I went through those in about 8 months, but because I was grinding an awful lot rather than honing, and they would. They wouldn't have taken an hour to make. I allowed an hour for a 12x4 bowl.
And is that a green turn bowl, like finished once turned?
No, that was dry. Well, that one was probably rough turn by that time. But I learned mostly on teak, which was what everybody wanted at the time, and that was all dry, mostly pretty dry. But some teak had silica in it, and I never even turned the grinder off. It was the stuff just took the edge clean off the tools, and then there were other boards I'd buy where I didn't sharpen the tools all week. So the good teak is just wonderful to work.
And this is in the time before there were scroll chucks too, isn't it?
Yep. Yes, everything was done on faceplate and screws at that time, and can get that bowl again. So in the middle, you can just see vertically there's a screw hole there and there, and so roll plug had plastic wood, whole range of plastic woods, different colours, and that was it. And then we hid those with labels. One with a price tag and the other was instructions on how to look after the bowl. So, and that was almost the first thing I learned in Douglas Hart's workshop. You stick a label over the screw holes. Anything but green bays on the bottom of the bowl. So that was a sign of real ineptitude if you had bays on a bowl.
Gary Mayhew, you got a question? You have to unmute yourself.
The rounded bowl that you showed, was that like a calabash bowl?
Yes, you could. Different shape though, really, because the calabash, I think, tends to be, you know, a little kind of not square. You know, it's not quite so spherical as this.
But that does
They're
kind
not easy to sell.
Right.
That's why I've still got it.
I think the calabash too, the top turns in a little bit more than what that bowl does.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Probably, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But the
Now,
round
normally
bottom,
what I
that's
do
pretty
these
cool.
days, when I'm working, where is it? See, here's another one, which was from, oh no, this is from the early 80s, and it was never sanded, just went through a period thinking it'd be nice to have it straight off the tool. And this is a spiral, totally wasted on everybody because you expect it to be grooves. So extremely difficult to do and pointless when it came to it. And I've sanded that warped a little bit, so it got put on a belt sander at some stage. But this has spent a number of years outdoors with clothes pegs in it. And more recently, it's been used for potatoes. But it's
Wow.
one of the reasons I've still got this. I don't know if you can just see the color here. This is a piece of Blackheart sassafras, which is pretty highly sought after in Australia, Tasmania especially. And it's just darkened up. It was a pretty flash bowl when it was made originally. And this was definitely blackish purple. And this was a light kind of brown. But one of my hobby horses is, in the long run, you better have a good shape because that's all it's going to ensure that the bowl survives. So that was turned slightly green, and which is how I rather like making bowls. It's one of my favorite bowls, I think. But what I was going to say was the other little ones. I tend to put a little tripod on the bottom, and I can't see what I've done with it. I had one here somewhere, but I leave 3 little feet on the bottom so the bowl always sits firm.
So you turn a collar and then carve it away.
Well, you've got a foot for when you're hollowing the bowl to go into the chuck anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of leaving a slightly wider foot. And it's, is that, no.
I asked Richard to have out. He said he'd have out a whole bunch of stuff to show us. So yeah.
I got myself prepared for this, and then so that just kind of sits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. So
Show us the bottom of that now.
it's really quite difficult to see.
Yeah, hold it still. That'll help. And then turn it a little bit so we get a little
Yeah.
more perspective on it.
It's
Got
they're
it.
pretty subtle little feet.
How did you make them?
You basically I sit it on the lathe bed on non-slip cloth and get at it with an angle grinder with a flat sander on it to go through the middle, the 3 points, and then I go from 60 to 180 grit and just smooth it out a bit. Takes about six to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really quite quick. And the advantage is that it can you can do that with fairly green wood, and then it can do whatever it likes, and the bowl will always sit square. People who really worry about those things.
Doug Resor.
So that's and I think if I was
Yes.
starting to make bowls again, I'd probably make them all like that. And
So-
that'd become my thing.
So I was intrigued by your comment about learning a lot from potters, and I think of pottery as turning material into negative space, whereas wood turning is exactly the opposite. You're creating negative space and cutting away. When you say you learned a lot from potters, what was your lessons from that?
Really looking at form and that kind of thing. I think because the potters have done. They've been exploring all the shapes for for millennia, really. So they've sorted out all the good ones have survived, and the bad ones didn't, basically. I think that's mostly what I got out of it. The other thing I learned I think I was quite lucky to be brought up in hanging around these people who are many very well known internationally, but they all had their production lines. And so they might be known for the big one-off pieces, but they actually day to day make cereal bowls and plates and stuff like that.
Mugs for coffee, yeah.
And mugs, yeah. And I would go and call on John Leach, I remember, because I'd pick stuff up from him to take to London when I was delivering my own stuff. And at 9 a.m, I'd go into his pottery and there would already be 100 mugs on boards. And,
wow.
They'd throw, I don't know, 300-400 a day and then put the handles on the following day. And nobody really found it odd or boring, it's just what you do. And I used to find that with making the scoops, I've met any number of people who say, I couldn't possibly do that, it's boring, it's monotonous, making 50 of anything. But my kind of response to that is, well, you only make one at a time, and or at least I can. And then you forget about the ones 50 you've just done and the 50 you're about to do. You just concentrate on the one you're making, and that's the way I get around it. But
I always found it took at least a dozen before I knew what I was doing anyhow.
Yes, yes. But you have to get in. I found with the scoops, the first 3 or 4 in a day, I would probably cut those and just see how my fingers were working for judging the thickness, and then away you go. And
are there any things that you feel you can do as a wood turner that a potter cannot do?
Well, the scoops are one. As far as bowls are concerned, no, I've probably just got less risk as much as anything, because the potters, they've got to dry out the green pots, then they stick them in a kiln if they're decorating. There's so much which can go wrong. Whereas turning is really, if you pick a decent wood to work with, and I would have my big boards in England. I'd go down to the sawmill on a Friday afternoon when they had a log I'd be interested in, and they would saw it for me at the end of the day, and the decisions on the grain and everything were made then. And I would, for 12-inch bowls, I'd have a 12 by 4 board cut, and it would probably be, well, some of those trees were about 4 foot wide, so they'd only be 5 foot long, and I'd have to keep those on end as I walk them around, because they're very difficult to handle on your own. Or I'd have them actually sawn into 12 by 4s, and then all I had to do was just go down the board, cutting out the circles.
Okay.
And in those days, we didn't have bowl savers. We were trying to work out how to do it. But the bowl savers, the efficient one, didn't really come along until the mid-'80s. So, wasted tons of timber.
Thank you.
But it really didn't. I had a kind of slicer thing. I can remember trying to take the bowls out, save the center, but it was actually faster to turn the inside out. And if you've got a decent ash bowl, and get the inside out in 2 or 3 minutes.
Bowman.
Yeah, I was fascinated with your early comment that you're a one-off guy. At least you were in the early years. Now you're talking about production. So it came to you after a while?
No, well, it's I was limited mass production of one-offs.
Okay.
So with the jarrah bowls, for instance, they would all be the same size and approximately the same shape. And that was for 2 reasons. One is I found that in a gallery situation, not many people will buy the completely individual, completely different item. I think people are afraid of having their friends kind of laughing behind their hands or something, if somebody's bought something really outrageous and one-off. the other thing, you want them the same size so that they're easy to price. Because if you're putting 50 bowls into a gallery, you don't want 50 different prices. It's a nightmare for bookkeeping and all that kind of thing. So I'd have them in batches of sizes, and the shapes could change slightly within the size, but it just made everybody's bookkeeping easier. And so I could say, 10 at $20, 5 at 40, and so on. So, and then what the gallery does is up to them. They probably vary the prices a bit because at the retail end, and most people expect something larger to be more expensive than something smaller. But if as far as I'm concerned, it takes much the same time to make a 12-inch or a 13-inch bowl. So I'm happy with the basic price.
My wife's a potter, and I discovered that pottery and wood turning have two things in common. That's how heavy the bottoms get. It determines how well the piece will be.
Yes. Yes, the thick bowls. It's and I also like to get some shape into the wall thickness. Here we are. A couple of little thin ones here. So this is a typical little small. That's how it looks. That is from the other side. So this is, let me get it up against the green or something. So this is a real kind of production piece. This little foot here, that's exactly the right size for a Vic Mark chuck. And they'll grip, because of the shape of the jaws, they'll grip on as little as a 32nd of an inch. So I can have a small foot. And if I don't like it, there are various ways of, all kinds of ways of re-chucking and taking that off. But generally, in this case, it just raises the form off the table a bit, and I think it's worth keeping. This is another. This also has a very small foot, so this is a bigger one. But typically, I like to take the weight out in here, just because it gives you a better balance as you pick the bowl up, and then I think you generally slightly outward flowing, your hand just kind of seems to go naturally into a shape like that. I find that the rims need to tilt in. People don't like the out-tilting rims, which feel good, don't sell half as well as the in-tilting. And so there must be something psychological going on there. But that's otherwise, it's a little bit of, that was what I felt was a pretty good bowl, which is why I cut it in half, just to try and find out why.
You sell for half price then.
Angelo, what do you got?
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Angelo.
I'm
Your face
curious to
is
know.
popping up.
I'm sorry. I'm curious to know how many scoops you made over your lifetime.
I calculated. I used to think it was over 40,000. I was disappointed to find it's only about 32.
Only 32.
But they were almost all made in the 70s. When I got to Australia in 1982, after that, really didn't have to make them because and again, I'm not quite sure why, but it was the heavier bowls which sold so easily in the Sydney market there.
And in your YouTube videos, you refer to downsizing your shop. How big was the shop that you downsized from? And how big is the shop now?
Only twice the size of the one I've got now. I've always turned in a fairly small space and then had a big shed for timber. But the present one is about, I think it's about 9 by 8 feet.
That's about the size of Angelo's shop, as it happens.
That's right. That's why I was asking.
Yes. No, it's pretty cramped. I mean, I've got a table saw which sits in under the drop saw in a corner, and I roll it out as I need it. But generally, I mean, in theory, I'm doing other things. I don't know where the time goes, but it's not spent turning. That's for sure. So.
Are you still producing work to sell in galleries?
No, I haven't done that for about 15 years. After in Australia, after 9/11, the tourists industry fell off dramatically. So and I would think probably 80% of my stuff was going to visitors, to foreigners, to tourists. So I had a very, very good outlet in the middle of Sydney, and they finally went under, gave up after the GFC, when people weren't traveling, there was no money around anyway.
GFC?
In 2008, global
GFC?
financial crisis.
Okay.
And so that, people weren't traveling for there, so that fell off. And I was about ready to give up the production anyway. And then I had my other main gallery up here had my bowls copied, which didn't go down very well, so we stopped dealing with them. And really, there was nowhere to sell anything, and I didn't really feel like doing consignment. And that's it. And I never really sold much in the States because it was mostly I was offered consignment, but really not interested, and didn't need it because I could sell everything straight off the lathe at home.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yes. Well, primarily when you're making a living from it, it's selling the stuff rather than, or having a reputation for providing on time rather than anything else, which is what you want.
There you go.
Ken Vasco.
Well, thanks.
Ken Vasco.
Yeah, hi, Richard. I was wondering, I have kind of an evolution of wood finishes. I've been changing just about every couple of months. Have you gone through the same thing, and what have you finally settled on?
Mine lasted a couple of months. It was in 1970, I think. I tried tried Canova wax, which the workshop I was in quite liked shiny. I couldn't get it on, and I didn't like it anyway. I quite like a matte finish. So I used, most of the 70s, I used some kind of cooking oil. So the oil would be put on the wood, and then I'd hold a lump of beeswax up to the spinning wood, and then melt the wax in on top of the oil. And so that was a kind of oil wax finish, and that's essentially what I've always used. Although in the last kind of 20 years, it would be mostly boiled linseed. I had when I used boiled linseed also when we were working a lot of open jarrah full of fissures and so on, and you couldn't put wax anywhere near that because it would just clog up the holes and be a night. Well, you just look terrible. And I think if I was starting out, and I'd probably use Osmo. That seems to be the oil people use around here, which is the German oil. And it's very thin, very expensive, but it does a nice job. It's still a wee bit shiny for me. But most of my stuff is, I want people to use it, so I expect it to be washed up. If it's going to be used in anything for food or anything wet, or if it's dry, then I hope people are going to polish it regularly, and that way it gets a much better patina, I think. So,
is that true for the little boxes too? Are they finished the same way?
Yep. Yes.
Would you like to see a few?
What have I got here?
Do you want to show a few slides? There's boxes in the slides.
Yep.
Okay, let's do that. I'm going to share screen. And
does shiny sell, or is dull that sells?
Well, it does, but I can find enough market for unshiny. So I think the trick really is, make what you want and then try and find a market for it. So there's enough. There are enough people out there, who want to buy your stuff. All you have to do is find them.
So we're looking at a shot of you in your workshop from which I snipped off your video. Everybody seeing that? Did the share take?
Yes.
Richard, talk to it.
Right. So this is a bowl which was, I can't remember the date now. I think it was 82. Somebody sent me a slide of it, and I think this is the one which was, I'd have sold it originally for about £5 or £6, and I think it was bought in New York by a dealer in London for more like $300, and then he sold it on to somebody in Finland for about £300. So there's a lot of money made on it, but not by me. But that was fairly typical of my very first teak bowls. It would be about 10, 11-inch diameter, I think. And
I noticed
the first bowls I put in had a thin rim, and I was appalled to find David Mellor, who owned the kitchen shops, was a leading industrial designer in Britain, and he had taken a chipped rim back to Sheffield, where he had a cutlery business and cutlery manufacturing, and he had put it on a metal lathe and turned it off, and I was appalled to hear that. So I thought, as a practical thing, it was much better just to make a thicker rim. And I think about that time, Richard Raffan, the potter, had said, oh, those rims look much better than the thin ones. So that was another reason for going that way.
Okay, next slide. This is delivered early work here.
I had that sitting right. Oh, I'll show it a bit. Oh, no, because I have it sitting right here.
You see, that's the trouble with slides. We have no idea how big they are.
No, right. So this is 10-inch diameter, or is it maybe a wee bit less? I've got a tape measure here somewhere. It's 200 mil, so it's 8-inch diameter. And it's a very nice piece of walnut, had all kinds of pinks and blues in it originally. And I made that for my mother's birthday, which was early April in 1970. So I've been turning about 2 months, I suppose, and it's still one of the better pieces I've made, I think. Very early boxes, yeah. Again, the two to the left, the one on the left is U, which had a nail in it, so there's a bit of stain involved. Little one's teak, and the other one is some kind of rosewood. But that was typical of what I was making in the late 70s.
And those all have a suction fit lid, don't they?
They do, yes. Not quite as good as I might have hoped. I've got those two here too. I can show you them live in a minute. I did those as a kind of production run for a bit. Those were teak, 8-inch diameter, with suction fit lids, cross grain, and amazed I could get away with it. But my daughter has that in England now, and it still has a suction fit. There's a biscuit barrel.
Does the lid have to be oriented the right way for it to fit, or will it fit in every direction?
No, that's what's amazing. No, it fits all the way around. But it says a lot for teak, really.
Yeah. Says a lot for being able to get a piece of teak that big too.
Well, in those days there was plenty around.
Not so much. Not so much.
Yeah. This is a U bowl again, which I've got right here, and that was made in late 72. I imagine it was the middle one of three, which. And it was one of these bowls, one very similar, which was in the Craftsman's Art exhibition, which really saw me arrive on the craft scene in Britain in 1973. It was a huge exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And I was the only turner in it. There were close on 400 exhibits, and I had 2 of them. And that saw me onto got me an exhibition at the British Crafts Council Gallery in Earlham Street, and I was asked to go onto the selection panel for their slide index, and that really took my career at the time to a totally different level. Right, so this is my very first large bowl, which my mother used for probably 20 years, and maybe 25, and then I got it back. It's a good example of a not very good first bowl, very good timber. But anyways,
why do you say not very good?
Well, it's a bit clunky, and you need to read turn bowl design or the art of turn bowls. But it's extremely clunky when you pick it up, or when you used to pick it up, not now. So that's the underside. Now, this is just to do with the making. You can see the two screw holes there. Now, the little recess in the middle was to do with locating the bowl when I'd done the outside. That was to do with locating it accurately on the faceplate. So that was just the way all those bowls were made. I made bowls for probably 5 years that way. And then this got returned to this. I've been thinking about it for some time. There was a discussion about bowls and returning and doing stuff to bowls on one of the YouTube not the Facebook channels, and I put this on hoping to get a reaction and got none. Anyway, so that's how the bowl looks now. And I couldn't get rid of the screw holes, but the new owner doesn't really mind. It's gone to the girl who did my website and revamped that. But that's how it looks now on the underside.
It's a nice piece of wood.
It's a wonderful bit of wood, yeah. Figured ash. Have we got the inside too? Yes. It's a pretty nice bowl. And it's now much thinner because it was a fairly clunky base. So I had nearly 5/8 of an inch of wood to play with, but the screws are gone in 1/2 inch. So I didn't want to risk taking too much more off. So these are fairly, yes, I just did these one afternoon, I seem to remember, and it was fresh banks here. I haven't really sanded them. It comes fairly clean off the tool. And probably, I was thinking in terms of turning them into, or putting verdigris on them.
So this is a one afternoon's work here?
Yep. No, it turns very quickly and easily.
Blows me away.
Well, I could probably get you up to that speed, John.
Yeah.
I'm on a VL 150 now, which only turns a foot diameter, and I had this bit of camphor laurel, which was a bit bigger. And I thought, oh, well, I've been wondering about doing a triangular stool for some time, and it led to all kinds of other little problems as well. But so it's flat on the top, and which I think I just sanded flat, and turned the legs, and the rest is handwork. So on the underneath, yeah, so the middle bits there, you can see there's a kind of curve underneath. So I've removed quite a lot of the weight, and that was power sanded, or I used an Arbortech planer cutter thing. And I do a few legs. This was always reluctant to turn cylinders. They're not comfortable things to turn. Fellow wanted these, how many are there? 6 legs for some slab table, and I think they were 4 inches diameter. Money was absolutely no object. And so I quoted fairly high, and the fellow through whom I was working doubled it. So, and everybody was happy, and he got his legs in a day. So that was that, and there they are. They just had to be cylindrical, that was all. Game of Skittles I made. You asked for recent work. So, sorry, voice cracking up. Yes, so that was a kind of Christmas project.
Yeah, I asked for recent work because we can see all your older work on your website.
Yeah.
And I gave the group the homework of going to look at your website, whether anybody did or not.
Yes. Yeah, so this is, my joinery barely comes up to carpentry, so it's fairly kind of rough and ready. But Most difficult thing there was cutting the angles accurately.
After it was turned.
After it was turned, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I did on a bandsaw in the end. This was a commission. Somebody wanted a natural edge bowl. This was the only piece I had, which is desert ash, which is not very nice stuff to work, but actually came out a lot better than I was expecting. So it's about 8-inch diameter. And this one I've had hanging around for ages with a big hole bored through the middle. And I just like, one of my favorite pieces was done by Soren Berger in New Zealand, and he had cut a set of random beads up, piece of facework. On his, it's a braid crock. And I think there's a picture of it in Turn Bowl Design. But that's about to go into use in the kitchen here. So it's,
you're trying to make it look like randomized beads, random size, rough.
Yes, and I succeeded quite well, really, didn't I?
Yeah, you really did.
I did lose it a bit. Yes, just about where the arrow is there.
There.
But I don't mind too much. It's rather in the area of a lot of the potters I know like the very free throwing, and I think it's a matter of trying to loosen up enough. So a lot of the bowls, one of the things with the green turn bowls are rather like that too, and trying to get the final shape done in one go rather than messing around with it too much. There was a piece of advice David Leach gave to my sister when she was throwing for him one summer, just making honey pots or something. And he said, you know, you must stop messing around with it. If you mess around with a shape, it'll look as though it's been messed around with. And I've always kind of borne that in mind.
So how did you turn these beads? With a what tool?
With the gouge, with a 3/8 spindle gouge. And there's on my YouTube channel, there's a bead cutting video.
Yeah, we'll come to a picture of that in a minute.
Yeah.
That's the inside of the...
That's the inside of the other one, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, these are not in a perfect order.
These ones, I've got this box here too. Now these were a pair. One's now in Minnesota. So I thought I'd make two of them. The hue and pine here is, I counted on the initial square, 4-inch square, over 500 growth rings. I had a 20 times magnifying lens, but it's very dense timber. They grow to 3,000–4,000 years old at least. This would have been a huge tree. Highly thought of us. No, well. So that must come off the video. It's so bad.
Yeah, I snuck some off the videos. Yeah.
Yes.
Here's the companion.
And I've got that here in the room too.
I was, as always, very surprised by the actual size of it. I'd seen it as a still picture, so I thought this gives a much better look at actually what this object is.
Yes.
And same for the next one too.
Yes. Well, I think if you can't tell exactly what size it is, that probably is. Well, it says something for the object, that you've got the scale right in relation to the grain and that kind of thing.
So when you make these boxes, is the flange here always that long? That looks quite long.
Usually, yes. Well, I mean, there are several reasons. I think one is it's much easier to make a longer flange, and you get it's easier to get the suction fit that way. And I've also, most of the lids I have now, I can put them on so you've got the suction halfway down the flange, and then when the lid's on, it's loose. You can spin it. And I just like that at the moment. That's the way I'm going with it.
This is from a video as well.
And the square plates, yes, they're very nice to use, very useful. They're much better than the round ones, I find.
They are turned too. They have a turned foot and a dished surface, yeah. And
the interesting thing with those ones really is that the sides, when you look at them from the top, especially the slightly deeper form, the sides look curved, but in fact, in one plane, they're flat because they go straight against the disc sander. And so when I'm turning, if the corners get damaged, it's really not an issue because they'll sand away a bit later. And I can show you those. I've got them on the desk here with me. So
there's also a video of those, I think.
The video of those, yes, they came out very well.
Why did you start making videos all of a sudden?
I had a fellow, and I was doing a club demo, and the fellow one of the new members wanted to shoot the video or video it and put it on the club Facebook page, and the camera battery ran out, so we thought we'd do it again, and he said, you ought to put these online, and he offered to shoot the videos, so we did it. I discovered I've had a YouTube page for 8 years, but I have no recollection of lining it up. But anyway, so I was kind of ready to go, and Dave's unfortunately moving north in May, and we have a 3-day window in April when he'll shoot some more videos, and at the moment that will be that. But thanks to you, John. I'm probably now going to investigate using my phone to shoot my own. We'll see how we go. Phones are good. And this. And this, yes, this boat, I don't know where I got the idea to design a tacking proa, so, and it was going to have a sail, but I sold it over the weekend to a Fijian who was delighted to get an outrigger canoe. So
I thought you'd made this for yourself, for your own amusement.
Well, I had, but there's nowhere to keep it, and I'm not flexible enough on the water to climb over the middle bit. So hips are too stiff these days, so I've got to build a different kind of boat.
Here's all the pieces.
And there it is, and it all collapses. I mean, it comes apart in about 2 minutes and goes together in about 5. So
it looks like you're doing all right in it here.
It was, no, everybody, the family enjoyed it, but it's, none of us have anywhere to keep it. That's the problem. So out it went.
I'm going to stop the share and come back to,
right.
I hope I am, let me see.
So we've now got, here's the little bowl. There are those ones. So quite little ones. That video, I quite enjoyed that because they came out so well. These little ones, I've been playing around those little bowls like this, which, and the main, that was done as a demo too, because it's, you turn the outside and then the shark jaws of the longer jaws on the Vicmark chuck will just grip around one of those beads without leaving a mark. So I'm always disappointed with how little people manage to do with the chucks they've got. A few more chuck jaws. You can do all kinds of things with chuck jaws. What were the other ones I was going to show you? Kind of interesting things. The late 70s made a lot of this is an elm bowl, round 10-inch, and you can see it's thin. I think that's why we left the holes in it. It's a 32nd of an inch. Is that half an eighth? A 16th of an inch thick, and made quite a few of those, and they were quite difficult because at the time the foot was gripped in a 3-jaw chuck, so I had to re-chuck that and turn the bottom off, and the bottom's still got my label on, which is it the right way up or not? No,
can't quite read it. Can't quite read it. Probably backwards too.
No. That's it. Yes. Anyway, Richard Raffan made this bowl to be used, hand washed normally and wiped with corn oil or similar. Cared for it will look better with use and should survive us all. I used to say should survive its maker, and then my sister pointed out that might not be very impressive if the maker was 80. This is a piece from. Well, I like bowls being used. This is a piece of eucalypt burl from Tasmania. It started off pretty white, creamy, kind of pale. I bought it. This is one of the ones I got secondhand in a market. I bought it back for about $40, and he would have sold for about 110 originally, or I would have got that. And I don't know what's happened on the inside. It might be just the tannins, but it's quite dark. And it's obviously been used quite a bit. Round bottomed as the base.
Do you do any repairs to your work?
Well, I hope they never need them.
What about when you're first starting to make it and you find a split or a crack or something?
No, I always got wood. When I started, a split was a split, and nobody would buy anything with a split in it. And I remember having a what you would call maple, probably English sycamore, had a little green kind of flame fleck in the middle at the bottom of the bowl, deemed unsaleable by 3 or 4 galleries, and gave it some friends had it, and within probably 2 or 3 weeks of use, you could barely see this flame. There's still just a little fleck there. It's kind of, these days, you probably get a premium for a bowl like that. But in those days, not a hope of selling it. So I've always tried to work material which is defect-free, and that happened until the thicker bowls came in, and people in the tourists generally wanted Jarrah in the Sydney market, and that's always came with fissures in, so I had to come to terms with those then, and that's partly why some of the bowls were thicker, and some of them were very fissured indeed. I don't have any around anymore. I had one which was almost like a sieve, which we see a very open weave cane basket, and very good for keeping vegetables in and that kind of thing, but that's gone to a good home in Melbourne now, so that's it. But generally, I want to work clean material.
Are you likely to do any more traveling? Are you likely to show up in North America anytime?
No. Insurance alone. I'm almost 79, and the insurance just goes up and up and up after you're 75. So I think when I went to the AEW a couple of, when was it? It must have been 2018, Kansas City. The insurance was just over $1,000 for 2 weeks. So thanks to your medical arrangements, basically. Much cheaper if I'm just going to Europe. So it's so I won't be going to America, but I might get to England, but traveling is suddenly very expensive from here. So.
Questions for Richard? Comments for Richard? Now's your chance.
I don't have a comment, but I have one of Richard's pieces from Saratoga Springs. He was my WOW partner in 2011.
Where's that bill? Is it?
Yes, it is.
Ah, there it is. Good. Good.
I also have some pieces from the class I took out in Utah with you, but I couldn't dig those up right away.
Yeah, well, I've got a plate of yours here somewhere. I think it's out in the snooker room. And yes,
good to see you.
It's nice having these things. You kind of remember people that way. So it's one of the great benefits of using things, I think, that other people have made. That's good.
John Chalikian.
Yes, Richard. I just want to thank you for your books. I've started, 50 years ago, I did a little turning in high school and college, and just in the past year or two, I've gotten back into turning. And I now have 3 of your books and 1 of your videos, Making Toys, and I consider you my mentor. I first got your books are fantastic. The turning wood has got me started, and I started I had an instructor in college, Paul Eshelman. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was well known back in the 60s. And he demonstrated the skew, but I never learned how to use it. And from your instructions, I started doing your practice beats and all that stuff. And I thought I was cheating because it felt so easy. And
that's what happens when you do it.
Yeah. And then of course after after a bit the memory forgets and I mess up and I go back to the book and I go, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong, and you save me again. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed your books and your video, and it's great meeting you and seeing you.
Oh, well, thank you.
So thank you.
I mean, I was very lucky to land with Taunton Press, I can tell you, too, who made such a good job of laying them all out, too. You know, get a much better, difficult to beat those publications.
Yeah, I have been very impressed with the books, and you reference this page, you talk about something that goes back, whatever, to some page that refers to it, and the photographs that somebody else mentioned. Great job. Great job.
Thank you. Good.
Bert, your turn.
Yeah, Richard, I don't know if you remember me, but I remember
the face. Yes.
Okay. I remember you from Calgary. And this is my little Raffan style box. And you taught us how to make that slip fit. But this one used to squeak. When it turned, it used to squeak. So I added a little bit to it. I call it my wooden mouse trap.
Right.
And it has a it keeps a little wooden mouse nice and comfy inside there.
I see you had a problem rechucking in the base too.
Exactly. Yes, I did too. Thanks again, Richard. I really enjoyed our time.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it was good to see you in Utah as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike Lebo. You're muted, Mike.
I've been turning since 2016. I started at age 71, and it's been a joy. But I basically turn boxes, and I was wondering what you do with end grain.
You broke up a bit there.
I was wondering what tools you're using to get into your end grain when you're turning boxes.
Well, scrapers generally, and there's a turning box video on my YouTube thing there.
Okay.
Which is I can't remember which one it was now, but so you'll see that. But I use generally square end scraper, a 3/4 inch, and it's slightly radiused to the right, slightly skewed to the right, so you can get into a corner. And if it's going to be round bottomed, then I'll use a round nose.
Do you use negative rake scrapers, or do you use regular?
No, I think I never understand what all the excitement's about. I can remember asking when I was on one of the Norwegian cruises, it must have been in about 2010, and I asked Mark Baker about it, and as editor of the Woodturning magazine. So what's all this business of negative rake scrapes? He said, oh, a load of old cobblers, he says. All you have to do is raise the bloody handle, and you've got a negative rake. And now I've had one or two run-ins with negative rake gurus, and they've always had something which you could only do with a negative rake scraper, and they've been disappointed to see me run around with a standard scraper. Yes.
Bob Silverman.
Yes, you talked about the evolution of going from a thicker bowl, or a chunky bowl, as you decided to call it, to a thinner bowl. Do you shoot now for smaller, thinner bowls, and why?
Oh, I always preferred thinner bowls. I've got, where are we now? I've just got some wet maple. Some maple was growing 2 days ago, and so I'll be making some of these. Which is,
I have one of those in my own personal collection, and I love it. Beautiful piece.
And this is about 6-inch diameter, and I'll it's still in the back of the van at the moment. I picked it up yesterday, and I'll just go through that whole log and make these.
How long will you take you to make one of those?
Oh, probably about 20 minutes.
Yes.
Well, you don't have that much time because you've got coming up the outside. You can take your time, but by the time you get down, when it's getting a bit thinner here, you know, the wood's starting to move. So, and you get the inside out with about 6 passes with a gouge anyway. So, you know, it's pretty quick. And when I was doing these kind of commercially again, and I had a microwave in the oven, a microwave in the workshop, I would turn one, put it in the oven for 2 minutes, and I'd have the next one turned and ready to go into the oven when the other one came out. So they're very quick to do, but you just got to take your. If you haven't done very many of them, then you've just got to kind of gulp and go for it, you know, and don't mess around because you don't have a second chance down the inside.
And those are cross grain, aren't they?
They're definitely cross grain, yes. If you did something like this with end grain, you'd just snap the end off. It'd be too weak.
Could you show us the bottom, Richard?
The bottom?
Yeah, flip it over.
Where are we?
Ah, there we go. Mm-hmm. Thank
you. And these are finished off. How did I finish it off? Between centers, basically. That goes over a chuck, and I use the conical tail center with a little bit of MDF. It's like a small button, if you like. It's got a central little bit of round MDF with a hole in the middle to locate the point of the cone, and that just holds it in. You're looking worried.
Question.
You show that on one of your videos, Richard.
Yeah. I'm pretty certain. I'm certain. Yeah, I think there is a video. There are 22 of them now, and I've lost track of what was on what. But there certainly will be one somewhere doing that. Whereas something like these little ones, the little rounded ones here, that just goes over a small tenon. You turn that and pop that on.
Hold it up. We're not seeing it. Lift it up. There you go.
Yeah. And so I can just turn that off and keep my hand over the top and get the.
So you turn the outside of that, then the inside, then the bottom. Is that right?
And then the bottom. Yeah, yeah. Because you got to hang on to it, and I don't know if you can just about. Oh, there's still a bit of a hole there. Oh well, yes. That little hole wouldn't worry me too much because it was all going to be covered in verdigris anyway.
Yeah.
So, but if you can see the kind of surfaces, it's not smooth. Now you can see a few of the tool marks.
Put a label over it.
Ah, yes. No, paint will do the job much better. Or the other technique is to start your signature there. That's another.
Angelo again.
My original question was on functional bowls.
Oh, Silverman. Okay, just a sec, Bob. Let me get the spotlight back so we can see it. Okay, go for it.
My original question was on functional bowls. Why are you determined to make them so thin when they're functional?
They're still functional.
For how long? If you have them too thin, they're going to.
Oh, I've had bowls this thin for for kind of 20 years using them. They're still people use thin glass. I don't see what the problem is.
Glass is a different composition than wood. We're talking about wood that moves and can break. Where glass has a different.
Yeah, but if you drop glass, it's more likely to break, whereas these generally don't. I mean, this one is pretty thin. Get a tape on it. So this is.
How normally do you thin? What is the thickness you normally go for?
It would probably be around 3/8 of an inch maximum. Well, it depends on what size bowl we're talking about. But if I'm looking at, I mean, this big apple bowl, this has been pretty heavily used for at least 15 years of its life. The reason we stopped using it for food was that the apples on those woods where the oil builds up inside and it gets very sticky. So it took months to get all the stickiness out, and that it's been only used for dry stuff since. But that's it's a strong bowl.
And what's the problem with a thicker bowl?
None. As far as, I mean, I remember when I was doing the AW at San Jose, I had an exhibition there, and some guy really attacked me for having a thick bowl. It was like the thicker one I had earlier on. And he said, why the hell would anybody make anything like that? Why would anybody buy it? And I said, well, that's what people buy. That's how I earn a living. He just couldn't grasp it. He wandered away shaking his head. But I got over things having to be an even wall thickness 40 years ago.
Angelo, it's your turn.
The bowls are nice. The boxes are great, but this is a box that Richard made, which he hasn't spoken much about. I don't remember the kind of wood, but inside the box, this is 2 inches in diameter and 9 inches long. In the box are pickup sticks.
Oh, I'd forgotten you had a set of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my pride and joy. Pardon?
36 sticks.
36 sticks in 2 inch diameter.
Yeah. So I have another set up here in cedar. So it's
now when you're turning that deep, what are you drilling that out and then cleaning the bottom, or what exactly do you do?
With this one, well, you just drill it out with a long handle tool.
A long handle tool, a long handle scraper.
Because you've got to clean the bottom out anyway. So yes. Anyway, my set's in Australian red cedar. There are ways of doing it. You can drill a tube and then insert a bottom. And there's how to do that is shown in the in turning boxes, I think.
And
yes.
It's especially interesting to note that the grain matches across the joint.
Of course.
Of course. Thanks very much.
Well, it's good. I hope you play with them occasionally.
No, nobody plays with them. No. They just sit there on the shelf. I look at them from time to time, and that's about it.
I think everybody should make their own set, really. So the trigger, you need to make the box first. That's the difficult bit, not the sticks.
Well, I would like to see you turn the sticks.
All right. No, well, there's a video planned on that.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I look forward to that.
The sticks, and again, I think on the first project video, I do a long one, so kind of 16-inch one.
Ah.
So I used to do those at the end of demos, the end of the day, when I needed some relaxation and no necessity to talk.
Thank you.
Kai.
Yeah. Hello. I just wanted to say something about the books Richard wrote. When I started wood turning in the late 1980s, there was no decent course on wood turning in Germany on offer, and the books you could buy dwelt mostly on equipment you needed for wood turning and maybe a little bit on design, but it didn't show how it worked really. And then I went to the book fair in Frankfurt, and Taunton Press at their stall had this book here.
Oh, that one, right. John was probably over there.
I probably was.
And it came with a video cassette. And that was an eye opener to see actually how wood turning was done, how to see the dynamic process and not only the photos or pictures of things being done, but really you could watch how it worked and how the process worked. So that was great for me. And I learned a lot from the books. And I think also the didactics, how you teach wood turning in these books is really great. So it helped
I think
me a lot.
the videos were amazing because I think I was number 2, wasn't I, John? I think Del Stubbs made the first video.
I think that's about right. Yeah.
And I was a week later, and I mean what fame I have. Hang on, I've got a phone call. I'm just going to have to answer it because he won't go away otherwise.
Well, while he's doing that, I'm going to say that, well...
I'll call you back. I'm on a Zoom meeting, okay? Right.
One of the things, I learned something then too. You'd make a book and, okay, let's make a video and we'll sell the package. But people wouldn't pay the price of the package. They wanted the video, but they didn't consider it worth very much money. But then when they got the package, they didn't care about the book. They only watched the video that they didn't have any value on. It was like insane. You couldn't make any money at it.
Yeah. But I mean, it was for gaining notoriety, it was wonderful because doing the workshops in the late 80s and into the 90s in the States, or in fact, even in Britain too, but going into woodcraft stores, the video was always playing in every store. There was Turning Wood was playing. I suppose it was partly because I was there, but I don't know how many other videos Taunton had put out by that time, but it made a huge, wonderful for me for getting the name out there.
Yeah, it's just we were ahead of the curve with videos, that's all.
Well ahead, yeah.
20 years later, YouTube comes along and ho-ho, yeah.
Initially, I wanted to have an audio tape, because I felt sound was so important. So that would have been extremely esoteric.
That's for sure.
So you'd read about it and listen to it. But anyway.
Yeah, but at that time there was nothing like the internet. You couldn't watch wood turning being done in the form of film. So the video really helped a lot and was a great idea. And that it came with a little cardboard piece that referred special parts of the video
pages,
to the book, to the pages, and so
we put a lot of attention.
And I have to say, this is one of the books that has been used quite a lot. I have lots of books on wood turning. They are in pristine condition, but this isn't anymore because I used it.
It looks quite new from here.
Oh, it isn't. Okay.
So you tend to forget that the wood turning as it is now really is a development since the mid 80s. And I was looking the other day in Britain in the late 70s on the British Crafts Council Index, which had anybody as anybody. There were still only 4 turners listed. Whereas now there would be, they all belong to the Worshipful Company of Turners, and there are several dozen professional registered members, many of whom probably wouldn't get into the Crafts Council Index because of their design or lack of design ability. But it's, and then Craft Supplies UK started up business in 1978, I think, and they were the first ones who really started producing. They produced the first decent wood turning chucks, and they were pushing all that in Britain. And then I think there was a fellow called Zimmerman,
Russ Zimmerman, yeah.
Russ Zimmerman, that was it, on your side, and then. So he was doing courses and things, but it didn't really start in the States, I think, until Craft Supplies got going with the niches in Utah, and that would have been in 82.
Yes.
And I did my first class there in 83, and was there for a couple of weeks every year for 20 years or so.
Doug?
That's what really kind of boosted it all, and it's just rolled on and on and on since then.
Yeah, I was fascinated by your timing on things. One of the things you haven't said is, do you have a favorite tool, like one you really turn to a lot more than
Probably
others?
the 3/8 spindle gouge.
A spindle gouge.
Yeah.
It's not a bowl gouge in your case. It's a spindle gouge.
No, well, it's what I use for all the detailing.
Okay.
And so if ever you're wondering how to get a smooth surface in somewhere, the answer, or do little beads or detail, and the answer is usually a 3/8 spindle gouge in my mind.
Okay.
If I had only one tool, it would probably be the 1/2-inch spindle gouge.
Thank you.
Depending on the bevel, you can do almost anything with one of those. But I suppose once you know what you're doing, you can do almost anything with anything.
Well, there is that. Sean.
Well, I was thinking you hardly had time to put your tools down if you're only doing it in 5 minutes. You have one tool and you do pretty much the whole thing in one tool. But anyway.
Well, that is the aim. I mean, you don't want to have too much cluttering up the bench. The fewer tools you need to pick up, the better, really. Because all those kind of, it's like you want a grinder which starts instantly. You don't want it taking 5 seconds to build up speed, because you do that, 50 times a day. Suddenly you've wasted 3 minutes, and it's standing around doing nothing. So
you could make 5 bowls in 3 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sean, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick but a very large thank you for your just all your contributions to the culture, specifically the books. I'm only 3 or 4 years into this game, but approaching it full time, really just so inspired by your work and your teachings. So just a very large thank you.
I'm amazed they let you in with this lot. You look far too young.
Just a wee baby here.
It's good to see you coming along. Next generation. Good on you.
My pleasure.
Joseph, who's Joseph? Oops, I just blew it. Hold on a second. I'm going to go. I got to go back. You're muted, so you got to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go.
I got to get Richard back in the spotlight. And now I'm going to add the spotlight for Joseph.
Yes.
Go for it.
It's nice to see you again. I had met you some years ago over in Indiana at the Ohio Valley Woodturners. And I only wanted to wonder about asking you, if you were to start all over again, what would you do differently, or how would you consider approaching the field?
I'd probably do exactly the same, I think. I mean, my advice to people who are starting out is go for the practical, or be a spindle turner if you want to make a living at it. And the advantage of spindle turning is that the builders or whoever you're working for tend to come along with the timber. In the morning, you turn the spindles, they collect it in the evening and pay for it. It's difficult to have a better business than that, really. I think, of people I've advised over the years, probably Mike Mahoney always gives me, always says I'm his only mentor. And he asked me whether to go take the arty route or the practical. And I said, well, I'd make salad bowls and go that way, and try and avoid consignment. And he'd be as successful as anybody doing that. There are 2 or 3 others around who've taken the same route, and you might not have heard of some of them, but they've had very comfortable livings, supplying kitchen shops and home furnishing places, that kind of thing.
Well, that makes a
there
lot
are
of
all kinds of
sense.
specialist areas. There was Malcolm Fielding, who used to just make lace bobbins, and they're collector's pieces now. It's a bit short. I have some right here, and a pair of these. These are absolutely stunning little lace bobbins.
Those are fantastic.
And at the time, I've had these for nearly 40 years now, but At the time, they were 20 or 30 pounds a piece. Oops, some of them come apart and there are little baby ones inside.
Hold them up.
But a pair of these now sells in England for about £500. So
What are they?
Lace bobbins for making lace.
Oh, lace bobbins.
They're spindle turned and they're, yeah.
And he had a whole 2-car garage devoted entirely to the lace bombs. I can't find the ones which come apart. Oh, here we are. So, and inside there's a little baby one. Whoops.
You got to lift it up again. We're not seeing it.
So
there we go. Holy cow.
That goes into there. I mean, they're just, the workmanship is impeccable. And he had everything you'd normally find with pens these days, which people are doing with pens, he did with lace bobbins. And they've always got to have the spangles on the back for a balance. It's a whole kind of industry in separate kind of trade in Europe, and stuff you have to know about the different forms of lace making. But so you've got areas like that where you could go. And if you're doing that, you might make things like thimbles and needle boxes, and you just kind of get set up for that.
And with that, we're coming up to, we've been here almost coming up on 2 hours, or over an hour and a half. And it's been a very entertaining evening, but I can see Richard is getting a little bit of a thirst on here. So I'm going to close the hour down, but before I do that, I'm going to open the opportunity for last words from anybody. Anybody got any last words they want to make?
Nope, that's all over then.
I think
that was a very, very fast hour and a half.
Let's have a round of applause for Richard.
Thank you, Richard and John.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
We'll sign off. How do I leave?
Well, you just stay put. We'll take care of all that.
Right.
We're going to go back to the gallery view, and then we're going to say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you all next Thursday morning at 10 a.m. for another Lancaster Woodturners Coffee Hour.
John, thank you for setting
Richard.
this up.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your
Thank
participation.
you, John.
Yeah, putting it
Thank
all
you, John.
together.
Richard, can you get a little more light on your face? You're in pretty deep shadow over there. Oh, that's much better. Yeah.
I'll try the main light off.
Yeah, wait till you see what happens when I put the spotlight on you.
That any better or worse?
Yeah, no, that's better. And when I spotlight you, it looks like this.
Right.
You see? Mm-hmm.
Richard, did you hear from Mike Mahoney at all?
I did. No, I did we had an hour on the yes, I did an hour's interview the other day. So I'm doing an article on him for the AEW.
Did he tell you that he found one of your bowls in an antique shop?
I have been in on that conversation. Yes. Yes. No, I've bought several of my old bowls in the local market, and I think with 2 of them I returned them and got an article out of it. So I sold the bowl originally, bought it back for peanuts, sold it again for probably twice what I got for it originally, and got paid even more for writing an article. So it did me very well in the long run.
There you go.
Cool.
I think people tend to forget that, some of us have a name within woodworking circles or wood turning circles, and not much further. And to the rest of the world, it's just another wooden bowl.
The term is micro famous, Richard.
Oh, is that it? Yes. Yes, I've heard 1 or 2 people kind of talking like that. Well, I remember once years ago, I was looking at an exhibition, a general craft exhibition, and there was a piece of glasswork there which was red and white striped plate, about 10 inches diameter, and it had $9,000 was the price ticket. And this fellow sidled up behind me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think they've put the decimal point in the wrong place. Looks like a $90 plate to me." And I didn't know I was talking to the maker. And it was an incredibly well-known, internationally famous glassmaker. And I said, "Well," he said, "Well, it's a very difficult technique." And I said, "Well, I don't know that. I'm just a wood turner. It looks like a wooden, striped plate to me, and that's it." And he was pissed off, to say, put it mildly. But I think, it's, you have the object which people look at and without any knowledge. So it's quite interesting, quite very sobering.
You said you returned a bowl after you bought it back. Do you do that much?
Well, fortunately, I don't often see them for sale, but we went through a period where there was some very thick, we made very heavy bowls in Australia especially. And actually, I meant to get one and show it, but it's
We've got the slides of that early bowl that you returned, so we can talk about returning along with that.
Yes. Oh, that was the first one, yeah. But it'll take me just 20 seconds to get another one, and I'll get that in just a second. But there were a lot of very heavy bowls, and there was plenty of wood to make them different. But I think one of them I did in, I think there's an AAW article again on that. I'm just going to dash away and get that other bowl.
Great, I drove him off.
Oh, he'll be back.
With the jet lag to Australia, I hope I can stay awake.
Well, in Australia, it's morning. Richard's a morning guy like me, so it's morning for him, and it's tomorrow morning for him, actually.
Oh, Albert's.
No, it's hidden away. It took a bit longer than I expected. But, these kind of very heavy bowls, which were about all we sold in the Sydney market in the 80s and 90s. And I always reckon it was because they couldn't be broken by baggage handlers. Most of them went overseas. So where are we? Yeah. And very nice, easy way to earn a living.
We'll come back and talk more about that once we get rolling here. And I'm going to get to gallery view here so I can see everybody. And I see we have 57 on screen right now, and they keep on clicking in. We will, we may get up, we could get to 100 here tonight. If we do, anybody over that will not get in. Other than that, they can keep on coming as long as they want to. Because this is Lancaster area Woodturners' first ever evening cocktail.
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.